37. Misdirection. March spread out Alfie's list on the blanket. Scrawled next to the list were the names Izzy had deciphered. Particle Zoo. Room Service. Hein Mulder. Vacuum Pact. Michelle Westlake. Surfing Murph. Dolores Leon. Wet Paint. Blanche Pottage. Plastic Replica. Brene Reuter. Here's Alfie's list, March explained to Jules. Methods and targets. Now we know what he was after. Moonstones. Jules frowned. What if Oscar didn't steal the list? What if they were working together? Alfie liked to work alone, March said, but maybe he owed him because Oscar went to prison. When he got out, maybe he found Alfie. What happened that night in Amsterdam? Jules pushed her food away. Could Oscar have been there too? March thought about the figure on the street. Somebody followed me, but I don't know if it was Oscar. Now that he'd seen Oscar in person, he wasn't sure. He'd only caught a glimpse in Amsterdam, and he'd been scared. He didn't have a clear memory. Tell us what happened, right from the beginning. My bike was stolen, so I was late. Just 1 minute, but that can mean everything in a heist, you know? I got there and didn't see Alfie. Then I saw someone moving along the roof. I looked down at my phone to check the time. When I looked up again, Alfie was standing close to the edge of the roof, and Jules stopped him by holding up her hand. Wait, hang on. Did you hear what you just said? You saw someone moving on the roof. You mean you didn't identify the person as Alfie? Of course it was Alfie. The next time I looked up, I saw him clearly. Jules blew out an exasperated breath. I worked the stick and rag. I know about what you think you see and what's actually there. Like tonight, Darius said. We all thought it was you on the cloud swing when it was dark, but it was just a bunch of lights. It's called misdirection, Jules said. So think, March. Did you see Alfie the first time, or someone else? Alfie thought about the shadow. It was impossible to say whether it was Alfie. He just assumed it was, and the next time he looked, it was only a second or two. Would Alfie have time, if he were that shadow, to get where March saw him standing? No. It was too far. There had been someone else on the roof that night. Dun dun dun. Chapter 39. The whole world tips. The knowledge lit up his brain, the realization a spear of agony. It wasn't him, he cried. The first shadow wasn't him. I should have known it. And what would you have done? Warned him. Don't you think he already knew someone was up there with him? Jules asked. Why do you think he threw you the moonstone? And what about the bike? What if Oscar stole it so that you'd be late? What if you were meant to arrive after Alfie was dead? March could only sit blinking at her. Jules Gray's eyes were holding his gaze. He realized that she was sitting just as he was, cross-legged, her fisted hands on her knees. She was like facing a mirror. The information seemed to come in bewildering bursts. Like all those TV shows in countries where he couldn't speak the language, he'd sit on the edge of a hotel bed trying to pick up a word that made sense. He had thought one thing, and yet things were going on that night that he didn't know. You think Oscar pushed Alfie off the roof? The world was tipping. He was sliding. He couldn't find a place to hang on. Jules' eyes were on his face. Maybe he really did slip. I saw Alfie up there, March said. He smoothed his eyebrow. It was our signal for me to take off. It was a warning. He pounded his fists on his knees. Because he knew there was someone else on the roof. He knew he was in danger. That's why he threw the moonstone. And the next thing I knew, he was falling. So the person who was following you could have been his killer. He felt himself fracture into pieces. He couldn't breathe. He didn't fall. Every muscle seemed to throb around that fact. He was pushed. Hold on, Jules said. Let's just take this slow. No, March shook his head. No, he was. I know it. Izzy moved closer to Darius. Jules hugged herself. They all sat, waiting for March to calm himself. He was swallowing again and again against the tears in his throat, but they were sliding down his face anyway. All he could think of was, pushed, not fell, pushed, not fell, pushed, killed, murdered. Terrible words from TV and books and movies, not words about his own father. He dropped his head into his hands and pressed his fingers against his eyes. He wanted to run fast and far. He had nowhere to go. March. Jules touched his knee so lightly that he wondered if he'd imagined it, but when he looked, her hand was there, close to his but not touching it. This is the one place, the only one in the world, where you're with the people who know how you feel. Not exactly, but close. Izzy moved an inch closer. Scary things happen. The worst wrong things, Jules said. Bad stuff in your head, Darius said. Feels like it'll never leave. Terrible dreams that won't go away, Jules said. Things you saw that make you want to rip your heart out of your body, Darius said. But you walk around every day anyway, Jules said. Izzy slipped her hand into Darius's pocket. When I first met Darius, I tried to pick his pocket. He caught my hand quick as anything. He didn't let go. She leaned forward, her gentle dark eyes on March. We won't. Let go. Not if you don't want. A silence fell, a different one, not charged with March's feelings, but something solid and good. March let the silence sit. Alfie told him about silence. He said that most people didn't understand it. But silence can hammer a point, make an enemy make a friend, close a deal. Okay, he said, but this changes things. If we want to acquire all the moonstones, we have to go after Oscar, and he's not just a thief, he could be a killer, so that's a reason to back off. Or, Darius said, it's all the more reason to do it. Alfie used to say that revenge was never a reason to do a job, ever. Revenge gets you jail or gets you dead, so if we do it without being crazy. If we go up against a killer, we just concentrate on the stones. That's the only revenge I'm looking for. So, who's still in? I'm in, Jules said in her quiet voice. Izzy? Slowly she nodded. I'm in, Darius said. And if you're going to do it, March started. Jules raised an eyebrow in a look that reminded him so much of Alfie that he caught his breath. Don't do it, stupid, they said together. Chapter 39. The Crystal Cave. The sign outside the door said, The Crystal Cave, for all your astral needs. Candles, dream catchers, jewelry, meditation pillows, promoting spiritual growth and harmony, MasterCard and Visa accepted. March pushed open the door to the sound of the bells. The scent of incense hit his nostrils, and he heard the recorded sound of chanting. The shop was small and cluttered with objects. Signs reading candles, books, meditation guides, spirit rocks, all hung from the ceiling and were stirred by a vintage fan propped precariously on a stack of books. Darius paused by a display of bumper stickers. Pyramid energy rocks, and mystics spoken here, and I break for yogis. Oh, brother, Jules said. That's brother, Darius corrected. Did you say your uncle owned this place? I have a bunch of uncles, March said. They're just not related. But yeah. A man swept through a beaded curtain. His silver hair was drawn back in a ponytail, and he wore a purple tunic with a pair of loose white pants. Namaste, he said, in a strong New York accent. Just holler if you need anything. We have a special on Arkansanti bells. Uncle Hamish, it's me, March. Alfie's kid. He reared back. Impossible. You're tall. It happens, March said. I haven't seen you since Istanbul. Hamish Tarchner winced and held up a hand. The emerald that got away. He strode forward and hugged March. I heard about Alfie, he said in a low tone. Yeah, well. He died in the saddle, kiddo, the way you would have wanted. The man was a dedicated professional. Now he's with the light. March didn't know if Alfie found the light while lying smashed up on cobblestones, but some adults said the weirdest things about death. This is my sister, Jules. Ah, whoa. Hamish took a step back. You're together, eh? Are you sure that's wise? What do you mean? Nothing. I often mean nothing. I'm so zen. Hey, you two look alike. Haven't seen you since you were a toddler, Jules. Glad you grew up. Hamish put his hands together and bowed. So we've met? Jules asked. Briefly, memorably, at 4 a.m. a long time ago. You and your brother. You had your own language. 2 peas in a pod. This way, young yogis. Come into my inner sanctum. He led them through the beaded curtain into the back office of the shop. A woman in a t-shirt and yoga pants was dreamily packing crystal paperweights into a box. Jasmine, can you cover the register? You told me to concentrate on the e-commerce orders today, she said. Change messes up my aura. The universe has many paths, and yours leads to the cash register, Hamish said. Peace out, she answered with a shrug and left. E-commerce? March asked. You're branching out. Certain details of my situation changed, and a scrutiny I did not appreciate occur. Cops hassling you? A certain unfortunate propensity to suggest that there could be an illegitimate side of my estimable jewelry business. Like you're buying stolen gems? Hamish shrugged. Anyway, I decided it was time to pursue my interest in yoga and meditation and semi-retire. March turned to the others. Hamish was my father's fence. Hamish winced. I prefer gem advisor. He would buy the jewelry from my dad, then break down the stones and make new pieces. I'm really into recycling. And sell them to second-hand jewelry shops. Everybody wins, Hamish said with a shrug. Or really high-end jewelry brokers. He's one of the biggest fences in New York. Hamish gestured to the boxes of paperweights, crystals, bells, scarves, brass jewelry, and candles. This is a legitimate business. The e-commerce alone bought me a nice little condo in Florida. Tell me what you need, young March, and it's yours. Did you hear about the grab last night? March asked. The widow's knot? Anybody contact you about it? Never heard of it. It's a rare amber necklace with a moonstone clasp that went missing at the Museum of Natural History. The thief got away. Cops think it might be connected to that Park Avenue heist a few days ago. Hamish looked jittery. He went quickly to the beaded curtain, peered out, then returned. I don't pay attention to jobs like that anymore. Too big. Too risky. I've got a nice life. They don't have yoga in prison, so no. How about Oscar Ford? Jules asked. Seen him lately? Isn't he still in the joint? He was released from prison 2 months ago, March said. Ah, you might want to check his bookie. Oscar never let a big game go by without a wager. Would you guys like some granola cookies? My wife made them. A tad on the sawdust side, but very nutritious. Ham, when was the last time you saw my dad? March asked. I know he made a trip to New York 9 months ago. Oh, who can remember? March knew evasion when he saw it, and leaned in and smiled. Try. Hamish put a hand on his chest. Oh, my heart, you look so much like your father right then. Okay, I saw him 9 months ago, right before Thanksgiving. I remember because I was packing up the tofurkey. Was he here? March asked. Came to see me, bought me a steak. Don't tell my wife, I'm a vegan. But who turns down Keene's Chop House? I'm not crazy. Jules stirred impatiently. What about the Grimstone heist? She asked. What can you tell us about it? You were Alfie's fence back then. He must have come here. Hamish wiped his forehead. Yes, he did. That night. Not a good memory. I like my mind to be a place of light and peace. That night was very dark. Yeah, most of them are, Darius said. Hamish smiled at Darius for a moment. Humor arises from discomfort. I forgive you the sarcasm. I'm relieved, Darius said. Tell us about that night, Jules insisted. Some things are better to not know, Hamish said. Not for us, March. Chapter 40. Death by the Water. Alfie came to my apartment with you two in tow, Hamish said. It was 4 a.m. He was out of his mind, raving, saying Maggie was gone, drowned, and it was his fault. His fault? Jules' voice was sharp. The escape route, Hamish said. Alfie had grown up around that lake. He knew it like the back of his hand. They were supposed to climb this cliff, then get out through an ice cave to a waterfall, some kind of secret passage, a rock like a mirror. He had planned the getaway the way he always did, scoped it out, timed it, but he didn't factor in the snow melt after 4 days of rain. The waterfall was much bigger than it had ever been. The rocks were wet. Maggie slipped and went backward, right into the falls. Alfie made his way back down. He dived and dived, but he never found her. She'd been washed right out into the middle of the lake. March shot a look at Jules. Go on, she said, her voice husky. Hamish got out a large pink handkerchief and blew his nose. Wonderful woman, he said. Could spot a cubic zirconia fake engagement ring at 20 paces. Sad. He cleared his throat. Anyway, the only thing that Alfie had left was the moonstones. He brought them to me to sell. I was surprised. The man never dealt in semi-precious. Then he showed them to me. Hamish turned to a locked case. He fished out a key from the necklaces around his neck and fitted it into the lock. I keep the semi-precious stuff in here, he said. I've got plenty of moonstones. Some ancient cultures believed that a living presence was captured inside the stone. In India, they call them dreamstones. If you put one underneath your pillow, you might just dream your destiny. He spilled out the stones on a black velvet cloth. And they're just feldspar. Isn't it amazing? He moved the stones around with a finger. Beautiful. You can see why they're prized. They come in all colors. Green, brown, but most are white with that blue sheen. The stone is basically transparent, but within it are these crystal layers. We call them platelets, so light is reflected back out. That's where you get that color. These aren't worth very much, but the 7 that Alfie brought, I saw how special they were right away. Can you describe them? March had to struggle not to touch the stone in his pocket. An especially beautiful adularescence. That's what jewelers call that play of light, that color inside a stone. With those moonstones, there was a unique deep blue that was inside the stone, but also there was an extraordinary effect when it caught the light. The blue seemed to float over the stone itself. Yes, I could identify the stones still after 10 years. I can still see them. They took my breath away. So what happened? Jules asked. I gave Alfie the cash and he headed for the airport. I thought he was off his rocker. He kept raving about a prophecy. March thought back to Carlotta's words about the blue moon, the night of the prophecy. Chilly fingers tapped down his spine. A prophecy? Do you know what it was? Hamish didn't want to meet their eyes. Hey, who believes in that stuff? He nervously scooped the stones back into the bag. Later I read that the stones came from Merlin's cave. How silly is that? March put his fists on the table and leaned forward. My dad did business with you for over 20 years, Ham. I think he'd want you to help his kids. Tell us about the prophecy. Tell us what he told you. Tell us, Jules echoed, leaning forward as well. Stop looking like that, the two of you. It's like Alf is here in the room. Okay, the stone said that one thief would be captured that night. Oscar got nabbed. The other thief would die, death by water before the moon is set. Our mother? Jules asked. Her voice sounded a little breathless. The moonstones predicted she would drown? I believe we make our own fate, kid, but it's easy to mock a prophecy that doesn't come true. That night, Alfie saw 2 of them happen right before his eyes. Oscar captured, Maggie swept away. What about Alfie's prophecy? Jules pressed. Hamish bit his lip. How old are you 2? He asked, March and Jules. Almost 13. 13 when? In a week, Jules said. June 29. Why? Maybe come back then and I'll tell you. Maybe tell us now, March said. Look, it's a silly legend. Hamish forced a smile. You see this shop? Lucky stones, amulets, Turkish beads for the evil eye. You think I believe any of it? I believe that it sells. Tell us, Jules said. He looked uncomfortable. The moonstones told Alfie, well, that you 2 would die before your 13th birthday. Together. 41. No such thing as fate. That's not a prophecy, Jules said shakily. It's a curse. And Alfie believed it? March asked. Never would have thought it, but yeah, I tried to tell him that the moonstones showed him a vision of what could be, he said. That doesn't mean it will. What were the exact words? Do you remember? March asked. Who could forget? Before the passage of 13 years, the 2 birthed together will die, and he saw the 2 of you holding hands and falling. The dream of him on a cliff groping for a hand and falling through space towards darkness. Spooky, Ham said, since he's the one who ended up, well, falling. He turned to Jules. That's why he had to give you away, to break the curse. If you 2 didn't meet until after your 13th birthday, you'd be safe. So why didn't he tell me? Jules asked. The question was a cry. If I could just interject here, Darius said, clearing his throat. If you believe in some crazy shut-up stuff, you don't advertise it. What was he supposed to say to you? Sorry, kid, but I think you're gonna die? Falling, Jules said. I have this recurring dream. Her face was pale, her eyes large and dark gray with fear. March swallowed against a suddenly dry throat. Of falling, he said. Yes, she faced him, her eyes wide. Of a hand I can't quite reach. I'm on a cliff, Jules said. With black water below, March finished. Hamish broke the stunned silence. Coincidence! He boomed with fake cheer. Our birthday is in a week, he said to Jules, trying to keep his voice even. His stomach twisted with fear. It's the night of the blue moon. That's why Alfie told me to wait a month to find you, because we'd be 13 and the curse would be broken. We found each other too soon, Jules said. You 2 are seriously freaking me out, Darius said. Stop it, Izzy said. She put her hands over her ears. Hamish stood, his feet doing an anxious dance. Well, this has been a lovely reunion, but I have business to run. Do me a favor? March asked. Hamish put his hands together and bowed. You know, as your honorary uncle, I will do you a solid any time. If Oscar Ford ever comes around, don't tell him we were here. Never saw you. They pushed through the curtain and went to the exit. You'll be fine, Hamish called. Just stay on the ground.